are back to our show we call Pilot Pass. That's what we call this show, right, Del?
Is now the part where I'm waiting for the joke?
Yes, it is. Did you get it?
No.
Unbelievable. I'm skipping
Explain
past
to the
you.
people to-
Del
Thank
is
you.
muted.
Listeners are going to love all this.
Everybody's muted. I get to talk now. I am in charge. Hello, everybody. We have a guest today. Let's ignore Del. Let's talk to our guest. Our guest today is Matthew Thornbury, host of the very popular Matt Men podcast. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, but neither of those things that you said are true. I'm the co-host of the podcast that like 8 people listen to.
We get at least 23 downloads per thing. So
That's
you know
great.
what?
That's actually more than what I thought.
We're superstars, man. We're podcast superstars. As Del and I established last week, we're basically the same person as Paul Shearer. We're on the same level. We're playing the same games.
I told Paul Shearer anytime he wants to step up to our level, he's welcome to come on the show.
That would be excellent. But since he's not here today, us three will talk about a show from the 80s, going back there again, Knight Rider, starring God. Can I say that? Is David Hasselhoff God?
Very close.
No, but
one of them.
Number.
I mean, if you're German, he might be. He sang that song on top of the wall that brought it down.
Communism down, man.
Exactly. Yeah. He did not do that in this show, however, but he took down all the criminals in his talking car. Del, let me ask you a question. What in the world is this show about?
Well, Matt, I'm glad you asked, because off the top of my head, I'm going to tell you. Come on, pull up. Okay, here we go. And open file, Knight Rider, Night of the Phoenix. Perfect. Knight Rider, first episode, Night of the Phoenix, broken into 2 parts, starring God. After Detective Michael Long is shot and left for dead, he's saved by the eccentric billionaire Wilton Knight and his associate Devin Miles. He's given a new face by plastic surgery and new identity as Michael Knight and the Knight Industries 2000 KITT, K-I-T-T for short, a dream car with super spy gadgets and nigh invulnerable armor. Wilton asks Michael to carry out his crime-fighting crusade, believing one man can make a difference. But for
Matt,
some
let
reason,
me ask you.
2 isn't good enough.
2 is not good enough. Matt, is one man in a talking car good enough to take down all the criminals in the city?
Apparently, yeah, because they got 4 years out of it.
4 whole years out of a
And
show about a
multiple
talking
spin-offs.
car.
Multiple
Miami
spinoffs
Vice had
and a
5.
made-for-TV show.
It is insane to me what they were doing in the 80s, but I'm sure glad they did that. Matt, Knight Rider is a show from our youth, but not just from our youth. I feel like that your youth had a little bit more connection. So I want to right off the top, let the people know what your history with Knight Rider is.
Okay, so Knight Rider premiered September 20th, 1982. That was about a week before I was born. My very first memory in life is actually being on set of Knight Rider.
How cool is that?
Yeah, right before I was 3. For some reason, my parents got backstage passes, and literally my first memory that I have is walking into a restroom at the Universal lot and running into Jan Michael Vincent. That's literally my first memory in life, is looking up and seeing him at the urinal and being like, oh my God, that's Airwolf. And then we walked into the soundstage, and my little brain broke because I saw KITT torn apart. They were filming the second part of Night of the Juggernaut, which was the season 4 episode 1, and KITT had his molecular bonding shell stripped and torn apart, and we walked in, and I saw that not only were they really not in the back of a black tractor trailer,
right,
but that KITT was smashed up. I started to cry, and that's when Patricia McPherson, who played Bonnie, came up to me, held me, and told me she would fix KITT. And then I was introduced to the man himself, David Hasselhoff. We took a picture where I'm giving a thumbs up, and he's holding me and giving.
Were you upset to find out that he was played by Mel Gibson? Was that also?
No, and the only person I didn't meet that day was Edward, what's his name? He played Devin Miles, because he had a headache and he just wasn't dealing with anybody.
Edward Mulhare?
Yes, thank you. Who was on the TV version of The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. But anyway, cut to they signed. We got the call sheet. They signed the call sheet. They signed a whole bunch of stuff for us. And then like 2 weeks later, I got a postcard in the mail from Patricia McPherson to me saying, "Don't worry, Matthew, I've made Kid all better. Just keep watching." And they gave us a Night Rocker poster that was his album at the time. I got all this stuff somewhere in storage, but and then a few years ago, about maybe 3-4 years ago, I found out that David Hasselhoff's nephew was opening up a coffee shop here in Dallas, and I reached out, and we were the only interview that he gave. And while we were having this great interview where he had like just gotten off a plane and hadn't slept in 8 hours, and he was really honest about stuff, at the end of the interview, I said, "Hey, I hate to be that guy, but I got to show you." And I showed him the picture of the two of us on set when I was, 3. And then we started talking about that. And after another 10 minutes, he goes, "You know what, man, let's take another picture right now. Come on, you and me, let's take another picture right now." And we got another picture together. And because of my lifelong history with him, plus I was actually on the set of the pilot episode of Baywatch. Because there was a role, I was a child actor, and there was a role for a little part on the pilot, and I had gone to 3 or 4 callbacks, and it was between me and one other kid, and our final audition was for the producers on the set of the pilot. So my young childhood was kind of intertwined, and I became, a super fan of his. So I love the show, own all the DVDs, and watched every version that they've had. Team Knight Rider 2010, Knight Rider 2000, the reboot, all of it. I am a pathetic shell of a person.
I love that story. So Del, I'm going to kick it to you. Give me a story that's going to be much more disappointing than that about Knight Rider. Go.
All right. I remember this was in the late 80s. I was living with my mother and father were still together at the time. So things weren't great. It was much better after they separated. Two Christmases is way better than one, kids. I'm just telling you if you're worried about your parents. So the only thing I can remember is sitting down, and there was this shag puke green carpet in our living room. And I remember watching, probably if it wasn't one of the first episodes I'd ever seen, because I'd seen a commercial for this talking car. And I thought, oh, how cool is that? Because I was about robots as a kid. I love space and robots. So I just remember sitting there, like digging my hands and toes into this puke green shag carpet while watching Knight Rider and not understanding anything about what's going on, except there was a badass and a jacket and a talking car. And that was all I needed.
Okay. I'm so glad you said all of those things, because as we talk about this show, here's a question we have to keep coming back to, because it's something that I didn't think about as a kid. It was something I didn't think about until I watched the show with my own kids. And that is, who in the fuck is this show made for? Because
these are good questions.
I cannot answer that, because like you, I loved the car. I loved all of that stuff. Every time he turbo boosted or went in 4th season, went into turbo pursuit mode as a kid, I'm all for it. But that's really only like 3 minutes of an hour-long show. And the rest is white collar crime about embezzlement mostly.
Yeah.
Every so often he'll fight bikers, but mostly it's guys in suits, and it's so boring that I have no idea who the hell this is for, because it's too silly for parents. You have the sexy lead guy, but then again, he's always with a new woman, so it's like, well, that won't appeal to most women, will it? But no, most of the women that he gets involved with have a kid. Right. So that way you keep the kids interested as well. And you've got, like, I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like it's made for anybody, but it only works with him. Right.
But he's kick ass. So that's the job.
Yes.
He whoops ass. And then there's also, he's a nerd, or at least there's a couple of nerds, because the car is still maintained by these professional. He's like a jock who's getting to ride a nerdy horse.
It's
so
weird.
But the thing is, the exact demographic.
Right. So little of it is appealing. Like, there's just a little bit, like maybe like 15% of the show will appeal to a demographic, and none of the rest of it. And there's no overlap. It is.
Do you remember the show Remington Steel?
Yes.
I feel like that this is the same kind of audience because that was a bit of a nonsense show as well. There was some PI involved in that kind of stuff, but it was a bunch of ludicrousness, for lack of a better term. And it feels like that there was a lot of those kind of shows in the 80s, maybe Simon and Simon a little bit as well. It was just this idea of doing the
But none of them
investigation.
had a computer
Don't you say
car.
anything bad? Okay, I was worried.
Yeah.
Matt was going to say something bad about
I've got
Simon Simon.
I've got my own pilot
No, I
for
love
Simon and
Simon.
Simon in case anybody ever wants to buy it. I'm ready to go.
No, I love Simon and Simon, but that's even more straightforward than this.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what? This always reminded me of as a kid, and I never cared for this other show, but I've watched it as an adult, and I still think that for some reason they're related. The Dixie car, the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
Because for some reason it's about the car. I couldn't for the life of you. I mean, it's just about a car jumping up in the air with some people inside who run around with hijinks, kicking ass. Except this is a less racist version and sci-fi and cool. So it's like somebody took they were like, okay, the Duke boys, right? Let's pull them out of the hills and put them in the city in a robot car.
Well, which makes sense,
but it's still kind of the same thing.
It is, and it makes sense because so you had Smokey and the Bandit in what, 78?
Yeah, starring the mustache.
Right. And that was with the Trans Am, but that was also, I think, the same year that Dukes of Hazzard premiered. So you have the car as the star, right? And then 82 happens, and you basically take those and add in computers because it's the 80s. And everything in the 80s was about either aliens or computers.
Well, cars,
but let's actually talk about the pilot a little bit, because the pilot.
Because I was going to say there is a kind of a little bit of a precedent set with cars being, like, even with Herbie, like cars having a personality is something that somehow, I mean, they do design cars. My mother, the car, Christine. And they do design cars to have facial features.
Yeah,
I mean, so there is something there. What is it, Proteasia or whatever, where you see the face in something. Right. There is something that people like to apply personalities to cars.
Right. And
really
they did, and what they did for this was, which was smart, they took, so you had, this is because of this show, I'm not just a geek on this show, but kind of Firebirds in general. My first car was a Firebird. So you had the Burt Reynolds version, right?
The Trans Am, that's my team. Trans Am team, baby.
Well, Trans Am and Firebird and Formula, they're basically the same body. It's
similar,
just the engine. Okay, so the first year they completely redesigned it from that was 82. Okay, and that was the one they used for this. And what happened was, if I remember correctly, Pontiac came to them and said, hey, we've got this new car. Is there something you can do with it? And Glenn Larson, the producer, was like, oh, wow, this is a cool looking car. And it is, because that design they use, God, everybody ripped off that design. Even Corvette ripped off that design. It is still a very cool, sleek looking design, especially with how they slimmed it down and that paint job. But what they did was Glenn Larson took something from another show he was producing, Battlestar Galactica, with the Cylon that had the woo visor, slapped that on the front of the car. Mm-hmm. And now you've got a brand new star, right? And that is so much of it. But you also don't get, especially in the first season, you don't get a whole lot of the car just because of the budget restraints. By the time you got to season 4, and I know this because we have pictures of it and I saw it myself, they had rows of cars where it's like, you can only shoot this one from the front left, because every time they would do a jump, the thing would land and the suspension would break, and they would just like tape them back together to do whatever they could. First season, you had the beauty car, right? Which was, let's drive it around, and it has most of the lights that work. But you'll notice throughout the first season, every time they cut to like a close-up interior of the car, he's always wearing the same outfit, even if in the rest of the episode he's wearing something different, because they basically shot a whole bunch of stuff really early on, and that wasn't even the picture car, right? And then they had one that didn't have a driver, that you could see. The seat
Right.
was where the driver was sitting, right? And if you notice, the first season they keep using the same footage of like one jump over and over because they didn't have the money to make more because it was a brand new car. You know, that was the 82 and this premiered in 82. So you didn't have a whole lot of the cool car action in the first season. So it's kind of weird to build your show around the car when you're not doing a whole lot with it. Although
Well, I
in the
also
pilot,
wonder how much was built on Hasselhoff, and then hey, you have this cool car, versus how much personality. Did they expect that car would take on such a life as a character, rather than just be, oh, it's an autonomous machine? People will see it as such. To, oh, no. People see Kit as a real,
Right.
as a real person, a real character, and now that
definitely
we
did.
have to kind of build on that.
I will tell you it is 100% Hasselhoff. And the only reason I will say that is because there is a charisma that he has on screen where he can get away with stuff literally nobody else can. And the reason I say that is they had this show, then they did in like 1992, 93, they did a TV movie that was supposed to be a spinoff, and they were trying to focus on other characters. Didn't go so well. Then they did a made-for-TV movie for the UPN Action Pack called Knight Rider 2010 that was just kind of like a Mad Max thing. Yeah. And that was one and done. Then they did Team Knight Rider, which nobody remembers. And then they did the remake sequel series that he appeared in.
Is that the one with Val Kilmer?
Yes.
Is the voice? Okay.
Yeah.
It's Kit.
And that one didn't work. So, and the same thing with Baywatch. The Baywatch movie should have worked with all the level of talent they had, but who'd they not have in it? Hasselhoff. So there's something about Hasselhoff that like he can only make these things work. And the funny thing is, he and William Daniels never met in the first season. The first time they met was at the rap party. So he's there just talking to himself for a whole season. And finally he meets the guy doing the voice. Like he never heard that voice while shooting. So you do me a favor? So you can't even say it's their rapport.
I want to ask
you.
You.
They literally didn't have a rapport.
Dell doesn't know this show, so I need you to tell me how great Hasselhoff is versus how bad Lorenzo Lamas is in Renegade.
Oh, man.
Talk to me about the polar opposites of those characters.
Well, it's okay. It's also, it's not with them. It's
and human beings, I guess, too.
It's not just the acting. It's the character itself. Renegade isn't as interesting of a person because Michael Knight is a guy who basically had his life taken away from him. And he's put in this position where this old man basically saved his life. And he's like, okay, you're alive. And I gave you a new face. Sorry. I gave you a new identity. Now. I gave you a new identity. Sorry. And by the way, I expect you to lead this whole kind of black ops corporate, almost superhero mission, right? So he has all this stuff thrown on him, and he rolls with it. And he, as upset or whatever situation he gets into, there's always a little bit of optimism. There's always hope, because that's what the show is about, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what separates Michael Knight from other characters like that, is the fact that he always, there's always a sense of fun, even when, except for the episode where, his wife gets murdered.
That one had me in stitches.
Well,
his in stitches.
But no, it's a tightrope that they walk. And again, it's why I go back to who is this for? Because in most shows, this kind of character won't work, but in this one it does, and it's so weird. This has to be right time, right people, just lightning in a bottle, because everything, like even the theme song, that opening, like it's like, who decided let's make this purple? The opening is purple, and It's like, oh, this looks awesome. The rest of the show doesn't look like that. And you hear the theme and you're like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Well, I think part of what it is that part of it is, I think they tried to modernize James Bond. James Bond was famous for having the different cars, having the gadgets. And so they were like, here's what we need. We need a story of the week, James Bond with gadgets. James Bond doesn't work with a partner.
He's
fellas.
He's an American James Bond.
Yeah,
You're
that's
absolutely
exactly
right.
it's exactly what it is. But so of course, but they still got to give him that buddy comedy, that zip zap back and forth dialogue.
It's like
so
if
they give him the car.
It's like if Q went with him everywhere. Yeah.
That is exactly what well, Q is the guy that makes the car, but
right.
I understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
There's equipping characters. If Q is in his ear the entire time, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, I honestly think we might have made progress on my original thesis, because I've never thought about it that way, that this is American James Bond, and that
because it is tricked out with
perfect.
all the gadgets, but it's the car. Americans love their car. I mean, British James Bond had it, but the speed, the muscle cars, that's Americana right there.
And the fact that his character, like, there's an episode, the one in season 1 where he has to fight some unruly bikers in this small town. He meets up with
episode 7, the unruly bikers.
Yeah. He meets up with Devin,
and
Devin is eating escargot, right?
Yeah.
And he's at this fancy French restaurant, and he just goes, "Man, I need a burger." And he forces them to basically make him a burger. And like, that's Michael Knight. He is,
those fancy characters of that kind. I love that you brought that up, because this was the time of Robin Leach and all those kind of guys, and it kind of started working in the TV. But that character itself, I think, was the best version of that, because like you said, he would do things like, "I want a hamburger right now." He wouldn't be like, "Oh, just give me some more truffles," or whatever it is. So I really liked how they utilized that character. It made him a little bit more normal.
Yes.
Well, think about this. Most of the characters besides Michael have a very, astute, erudite type feel to them.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, Kit's voice is very, very British. You have Edward Mulhare, Devin Miles. Everybody's so sophisticated. Hasselhoff's kind of like the one, he's the American almost brought into MI6.
Yeah.
Or MI6 wants to operate here.
Which is why I think when they bring in RC in season 4, the streetwise Chicago guy, that's why I think he doesn't really fit in, because it's like, well, no, Michael's already doing this.
Right.
Like,
You already
Michael's
got the outside guy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially since they have already set all of this up, and they've gone through probably years of trying to get this car working. Right. And then this cop gets shot in the face, and the guy paying for everything goes, "He's driving." This guy's driving. Yeah, like
I just want to see a crossover between this and RoboCop, where people are just like, start grabbing all the people that are dead and putting them in machines. Like, I'd love it if we found out that Kit was very much like RoboCop, like, that guy dead, grab him or putting him in a car.
No,
dead guy, Michael Knight.
No, that's what they did in Knight Rider 2010, and it totally didn't work. And they kind of did it in Knight Rider 2000, because the new driver, that woman, used part of Kit's original chips to, she got shot in the head, and she needed some computer parts, and it just so happened it's part of Kit. So Kit's not whole without her.
Clearly the issue isn't the story, because I've perfected the story. It must have been the writing and possibly some of the acting. Could we take just a break for a moment and talk about my 2 favorite spinoffs from Knight Rider? And that would be Kung Fury, where they drive the car with the Hoff 9000 in it, as is Kit. And then I think probably the most underrated television show of all time, after
Viper?
The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer, Heat Vision and Jack, where Jack Black plays an astronaut who becomes smarter than all people when exposed to the sun, and he drives a motorcycle with the dead partner who's inside, which was Owen Wilson. Is that what it was? Yeah. And it was just intentionally written to be a terrible, terrible pilot by like Ben Stiller and them. But
do you remember
clearly a ripoff of Knight Rider?
Well, no. If you want to rip off, do you remember the show Viper from the mid-90s?
Oh my God, I do remember that show.
You know what Viper's about?
Wasn't the car a Viper?
It was, but it was about this undercover cop who got shot in the line of duty, and they gave him a new face, and he started working for the secret organization to take down. Yeah, it is the exact same. I remember watching previews for it. I'm like, this seems familiar. And
how many episodes did Viper Run go?
I would say they aired probably 6 episodes, and then they swapped over and started working on Mantis.
97.
78.
97?
78 episodes.
78.
That is 4
seasons. It ran forever. It ran forever.
So many. That is way too many.
And you need to watch the opening later because you'll watch the opening
Hold
titles
on.
and you're like, no, how'd they not go
What
to
year
jail
was
for
this? Because
Like
if I'm
95,
understanding, okay,
94?
from my
94.
understanding in 95, 94, 95, there was still homelessness in America. And we're putting money towards Viper?
Oh, no.
No,
In 94,
no.
In 94, they were still running reruns of Knight Rider. They had
And I
the
was still watching
audacity
them.
to put this show on.
Okay.
Okay, I do
I'm
recommend
moving on with
everybody go watch the
this.
trailer for Viper because this is amazing.
It's awful, isn't it?
This is quite possibly one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life, and I've only seen 21 seconds of it, so I'm very excited about that.
I would say we should cover the pilot of that, but we're talking
might
about
have
Knight
to,
Rider, so we just
yeah.
did.
Well,
It's literally
Well,
the
see,
same
here's what
thing.
we're gonna do. Once we get
Compare
a
and
whole bunch of
contrast.
like one groupings, well, I was gonna say once we get some groupings, we can start putting together some playlist groups like autonomous cars and people,
Oh, it's like,
or
here's the pilot episode for Saved by the Bell. Now we'll do California Dreams.
there you go.
we'll do
exactly.
California
Yeah, here's
Dreams
all the-
first, and then Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, here's all the high school shows together. So 90210, Saved by the Bell,
Moesha.
everything like that. That's what we got to start. Oh my god.
My
So
daughter,
just terrible shows. So we'll just put a group of terrible shows together.
my oldest daughter came into the living room the other day and she goes, "Have you heard of this show, Sister Sister?" I was like, "Yes, I've heard."
Oh
of
my
Sister
god.
Sister."
Yeah.
Classic. Well, we're not going to say what we feel about Viper, but we will say what we feel about Knight Rider, the pilot episode.
We didn't talk about the pilot at all. It's
We
great.
didn't.
No,
we didn't really, but
it,
we
it
did
doesn't
talk about
matter.
the
They're
show.
all the same.
Yeah.
Dell, even though this is not fresh in your mind, you still remember Knight Rider show. Do you recommend the pilot to the people?
Yeah, I felt a little sleazy being on this episode. In fact, I even tried to kind of get out of it because I didn't have a chance to watch the pilot again and refresh myself. But Thornbury just pointed out, "Have you seen any episode at all?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "It doesn't matter.
They're all the
You've got
same."
it."
I mean, it gets really cartoony, but
Yeah.
you know.
I would say based on the fact that I can't remember the pilot at all, but how much I enjoyed the show as a kid. And I've even watched a few episodes as an adult. It's still fun. It's the American James Bond, I guess we've decided, with a talking car. How cool is that?
Yeah.
It's HAL 9000 meets James Bond. You know what? I'm down just on that premise, even though I'm the one that
Right.
created it.
I do want you to have Karis watch it because I'm fascinated what in the world she would think of this ridiculousness. So make
we
sure
do
to
need to
give
do
us
a
note.
kids version. We do need to do a kids version of Pilot Pass.
Why are these old people watching these shows?
There are some shows that I am like, I would love. I just showed her the Mr. Crusoe scene from Life of Brian, the one where the guy eats so much he explodes.
Meaning of life.
Meaning of life. Sorry. Oh my God. Meaning of life.
Oh.
Yes. I can't believe I just did that. What did I
Well,
say?
Dell is muted. Matt, I think we know your answer, but would you recommend Knight Rider to the people, the pilot episode?
I'll say this: if you watched the later
Grail?
season,
I hit the button. Sorry, guys. I got too
Hey.
high and mighty. That's my fault.
if
I'm
if
muting
you've
myself
watched
now.
if you've watched the later seasons and think those are amazing, you might not like the pilot because the pilot's actually fairly serious and very straightforward. But I think it's actually pretty good, especially for TV at the time. I think that if you really like the pilot, maybe skip season 4 because season 4 kind of turns into even more of a cartoon. But I really like the pilot. I think most of it works well. I think that the demolition derby scene wasn't needed, but you had to show off what the car could do.
That's true.
So yeah, it works.
I dig you. I agree with what you said
Guys,
there.
can
I
ask
enjoyed
a
the
quick
pilot.
question
Oh,
here?
please do. Go for it.
Sorry. No, because you need to. We need to hear from you. Then we'll come back to me.
Okay, so the pilot I did enjoy as well. It is fun if you want to kind of dip your toes in the Knight Rider water. I mean, this is it. It doesn't give you everything. It is a little too long because it's 2 parts, but you'll know what you're getting into from the pilot. I think so. So I recommend Knight Rider. Now, Dell, ask away.
So our show's called Pilot Pass. So I want to see, what do y'all think of Knight Rider 2020, but it's a plane?
That's called
Would it
Airwolf.
work?
It's called
a helicopter.
I've got all these great ideas that people have done poorly. And here I am sitting on a gold mine in the future.
Well, here's the weird thing. It's like, except for turbo boost, like our cars can basically do what Kit does. Like, if you get a Tesla, it can do pretty much everything except for like, there's an episode where Night Automated Roving Robot, somehow uses focused microwaves to stop a guy's pacemaker. Our cars can't do
Which is
that
actually
yet.
totally doable. No,
Yet.
not cars, but that is
Yeah.
possible to do. Yeah.
Our cars can't do that yet, but pretty much like 80% of what he does in the show, a Tesla can do, and probably better.
I
So
agree.
you're waiting for the turbo boost and the heart jammers.
Ejector seat as well.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, the best ejector seat was from Too Fast, Too Furious, but that's another show for another time because we're wrapping this one up now. Pilot Pass Night Rider. I hear the moans. I don't care. I'm talking right through your moans, Matt. Don't judge
Too Fast, Too Furious.
me. The best in the series. We'll talk about it on our show. Yes.
That's first of all, that's crazy talk. Also, second, we'll never talk about it because that's not a TV show. So
That's why we're talking about it on our show, which is called Matt Men, which you can find anywhere on the webs. If you look for it, you can talk to us as well. We have pages where you can do that.
We're kind of prophetic too, because the stuff that's going on now,
Yeah.
we talked about on our show a year ago.
I mean, we're pretty smart. We are pretty well the most smartest people in the whole wide world. So listen to that show.
SMRT.
If you want to listen to Pilot Pastel, how would they do that?
Guys, you can listen to Pilot Pass, at least the audio version of it, on all the major podcasting apps, Stitcher, iTunes, FM Player. What do they got? They got anyway, all of those
Spotify?
things. Just type in podcast, Spotify. That's right. Just basically type in podcast in whatever you go to download, whatever store you go to download your appy apps. Do that. We're also available on YouTube, again, on the video streaming service. So you can just type Pilot Pass, although that will pull up a lot of videos for learning how to pilot an airplane.
It will, yes,
So
it
make sure
will.
you add something like Pulling and Pizzana podcast, one of the movies, and get that algorithm fixed so that when you type Pilot Pass, folks, the world knows who you want to pull up. Make that algorithm work for you and for us. Make sure you check us out on our Patreon. Any money that you send us is going to be going towards merch. And for that, we have a couple of different tiers. You can recommend shows. If you spend enough money, we'll let you come on and guest on a show. Matt, thanks for that 83 cents you sent. That's enough to get you on the show. And then we're also going to be letting you see the live stream that we do as we converse here on the Zooms. So you can see us doing embarrassing stuff behind the scenes. Which one of us was partially naked through this episode? I won't tell. You'll have to pay the money.
I don't know if that gets people to
partial
pay
about
money.
me.
There is no money to be paid there.
All
Usually,
I'm saying is I can't wait till we wrap this up and I can stand up.
Usually we end this segment with Dell telling a wonderful, humorous joke. But since you're the guest today, Matt, end us with a joke. Go.
Okay.
Oh,
There
it's too
were-
long already.
No. This is a good one. There were once two little people, and they were out partying in Las Vegas,
Uh-oh.
and they were getting very drunk. And little person one said to little person two, "Hey, let's go pick up a prostitute."
Mm-hmm.
So they both got prostitutes and took them to their adjoining rooms. And
Did
The
the
first-
prostitutes open the door, or did the midgets like step on some feet to get to
why
the
don't
door?
you shut up and listen?
Offensive.
First, little person had too much to drink, couldn't perform, got mad, threw out the prostitute. He already paid, so he felt kind of bad, like he wanted to get his money's worth. So he put his ear to the door, listened to little person number two, and he kept hearing, "Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, for like half an hour, passed out. Next morning, they're eating breakfast at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The little person one and two are kind of nursing their hangovers, and little person two says, "Oh, how was your lady?" Little person one says, "I actually couldn't even perform, so I had to throw her out. But I heard you guys going at it until I passed out. You sound like you were having fun." Little person two says, "What are you talking about? I couldn't even get up onto the bed."
It's funny because it's true. Little people love breakfast buffets.
I heard I stole that joke from Norm Macdonald. I heard him tell it on Conan O'Brien back in like 1997, and I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard.
Tune into Matt Men next week because we'll tell you about the time we saw little people wrestling.
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's right. I was there for that one too. I was in
that
such a bad
was
mood
a
until it
glorious
started.
meeting.
That
was a
cheered me up
glorious
so
evening.
much.
Until then, thank you everybody for being on the show. We will see you next time.
Bye,
Adios.
everybody.
Bye.